Thanks for joining us today, guys. Today we are joined by Jeroen Corthout, and excited for him to share a little bit about his journey and his experience and some of the tidbits that he's got to leave with you guys today. So without further ado, Jeroen, you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Happy to be here. I'm Jeroen Corthout, co-founder and CEO of Salesflare. And say very quickly what Salesflare does. It's an easier CRM. What is CRM? A customer relationship management system for small and medium-sized businesses who sell B2B. So basically, if you want to follow up leads in a better way, and you sort of hate that you always have to do a lot of data input in a CRM system to make that work, this is the issue we solve, because Salesflare automates all that data input and make sure that the system tracks the customers for you, and you can just talk to the customers.
Have you always been on the entrepreneurial tech side?
First of all, more or less. When I was a teenager, I made websites, and that was a little techy. But what I liked mostly about it, I think, was the design aspect and the working with customers. I did then study engineering, which was initially I thought computer engineering, but that seemed a little nerdy. Then I did electronical engineering, which was actually as nerdy in a way. And I specialized in biomedical engineering. Then I went applying for jobs, and the jobs were very techy and very little with customers. So I didn't really like the opportunities, and I studied business school. And then I actually started in a marketing position. So I went the full opposite direction. Very non-techy marketing. It was in a pharma company called Baxter. It's a US company. It was in Belgium. And that's where I sort of, at some point, because people were so low tech, that I understood there was an opportunity. And I thought, I'm going to start a company that helps these people with building websites and beyond that, all the digital stuff. Because the people in the marketing roles were like former salespeople always, because pharma marketing has always been traditionally very sales driven. And all of a sudden the world shifts and you have the internet and stuff, and they don't know anymore how that works. But then I had dinner with a guy, and apparently he had a company that did that. And he said, join me, I'll teach you everything. So I did that. And then again, I always wanted to start my own company, entrepreneurial. And I tried a bunch of things. I've always taken it from the business perspective, but I've always been deep in the tech side as well. Now I've never built, no, that's not true. At Salesflare, I've never touched the code of Salesflare. In previous places, projects, I did make the mistake of doing it. It is not my main skill. So it's a bad thing when I start spending my time there. One time it was a good idea. That's because it was not very techy. It was not software. It was more of a blog project. And there I went very technical as well, but that actually helps me until today. Because I got a lot of SEO experience there. But that was a very complicated answer to your question, whether I'm like more on the tech side or the side. Or, yeah.
So when you were at Baxter and the marketing that you were doing, you were talking about the sales folks. Was it more B2C where you're at the end user, or was it more B2B where you're going to doctors and offices, et cetera?
Pharma companies, they cannot even talk to patients. That's a very early mistake I made, and my boss was very angry at me. Because in my first job, one of the main responsibilities I had was a drug for hemophilia. And I knew that the son of a person I knew had hemophilia. So I started talking with him about it and stuff. And, I want to make that connection, but that was not done. We were not supposed to do anything directly with the patients. Regulatory, clear line. we were only supposed to talk to doctors and pharmacists. This is in the pharma industry. The over-the-counter, where it's not prescription-based, is a whole other space. And actually, Europe and the US are also two wildly different places in that respect. But generally, prescription pharma companies don't talk to patients. And well, the line is a little different in the US and in the EU. So in the US, people can set up websites to educate patients way more than you can do in Europe, for instance. But that's, again, a complicated answer to your simple question.
So you've mentioned Europe, you've mentioned Belgium. Where are you located, and kind of what's your geographic background?
I was born in the US many years ago, in New York State, but from Belgian parents. It was just my dad has worked in many different places for a company called Philips. It's a Dutch company. We lived in the US. We moved back to Belgium in Flanders, where they speak Dutch. Then we moved to Wallonia, where they speak French. We moved back, and I lived in a bunch of cities. I also studied for a while in Italy, in Milan. But currently my home is in Antwerp. And Antwerp is, imagine, you probably know Brussels. It's like 30 minutes north. It's the second biggest city of Belgium after Brussels. It's the main city of the region where they speak Dutch, and it's a big port city. It's not. I said big, but from a US perspective, it's relatively small. It's more like 500,000 people, everything around it. But it is the second biggest port of Europe after Rotterdam. It is the place where 80% of the diamonds in the world pass through, because we have a big diamond center very close to our office. It is a fashion capital and a few other things.
Very cool.
I feel like I'm overcomplicating everything in every answer now.
It's all right. It gives us context, right? And perspective, which I think is hugely important. So as we jump into the main question, right? As you started to experience success and you had more and more profitability, right? Didn't have to worry about roof over the head, food on the table. Mm-hmm. What was your framework in terms of where you started investing, your money? Did you pour it back into the business? Did you look to, invest in the equity markets, the stock markets? Like, where did you put your money, and kind of what drove or what drives that decision making?
Honestly, I don't think our framework has changed between when we were not profitable and from the moment we were profitable. It has always been reinvesting in the business. But we are a SaaS company, software as a service. And the software as a service model requires an enormous amount of investment. So we have been investing from the beginning because essentially the old way of selling software was like, you want software. I tell you this is what we're going to build, and it's going to cost that much, and you pay maybe half up front or half at the end, what the payment terms are. But there's money pretty quickly. Then there was a model after that, before SaaS became the standard, where you would pay a big sum and then maintenance. Most of the money was made in the beginning, and it was software that I built once and then sold to multiple people, often with customization, because the model would take that. Now, SaaS is a totally different thing. Basically, we build software and you only start paying after we build it. And then you don't pay us at once. You pay us in very small amounts over a long period of time, as long as you use it. So that means that we make a lot of investments first, and then people start paying us. Now, the interesting thing about the model is there's not much customization needed, and every additional customer doesn't cost as much. So that means that after a while, after going through this whole investment cycle, we actually start getting good returns. Now, we are at that point, getting these good returns. And what we want to make sure is that people stay happy, people get more value. So we keep actually building the same way as we were building before, maybe a bit less. No, it's not true. It's actually just the same as before. So we have investment areas, we expand functionality. We make sure that anything that's wrong with the software is solved. It could be bugs, or it could be just not that it's broken, but it just could be better improvements. And it's making sure that it's just always easier for new customers to get on board. And it's a continuous building process. So we do very little routine work or so. We're always building the product, and next to that, we're also always building our marketing channels and the content we create around it, and all of these things. It's a continuous sort of reinvestment story. And you're asking, did I put it in the stock market or so? No, my money is in SalesFlare. Actually, most of it, the large bulk of my money is in SalesFlare. I do have some money. I pay myself a little money with which I can pay off this nice apartment here and all that, but it's really not a comparable sum. So reinvesting in the business is the short answer.
So as the business has grown and you're more and more profitable, right? Are you just reinvesting more and more from an absolute dollar perspective back into the company? Or does, some of that get siphoned off and you just, so I guess where I'm going with this is twofold. One, when you say it's consistent, is it consistently the same dollar amount year over year, or is it consistently the same percentage year over year? Or is it just consistently take as much as we can and we have and just dump it back into the company?
Currently, it makes more space for extra investment in the company. Whether that's going to be a long-term thing where at some point we cannot just also pay ourselves a little more, I don't know, could be. But so far, it's the amount that we reinvest in the company that also increases.
Has that resulted in accelerated growth for you and increased profitability along the lines?
In short, yes, I think so. We have seen increased growth in the past years. Every year we've added actually not just more in absolute terms, but also more percentually. So for us, it's a very calculable kind of thing, because we're selling subscriptions. It's really a numbers game to a certain extent. There's customers joining us. There's customers growing their amount of users or upgrading their plans, or removing users and downgrading their plans. And we have people leaving us. And so we add this recurring revenue. I can tell very exactly what we're going to earn next month, what costs we're going to have, and also it's and while that happens, I can also decide, oh, this is how much we'll extra spend on this. This is we can make a new website with that. We can this can all be planned. Much easier than if we were running, let's say, a consulting business or so, where you're very dependent on the projects that come in. For us, it's really growing that recurring revenue.
At what point does that reinvestment start to change or taper off, right? I imagine at some point you're going to have diminishing returns, right? When the more you put in, you're not getting the same level of growth out, right? And so have you guys thought about where that point is and where you start to shift focus when that happens?
I think we're going to feel it. As long as we feel that investing more pays off, I think we're going to keep doing it. If we start feeling that it starts tapering off, there's two options. Either we don't invest more, or we just rethink how we're reinvesting things, because we might not be putting it in the right things anymore. We might not be prioritizing things well, but we're not at that point yet. So.
What, as you think through, some of the people who might be listening who are involved in the tech space and kind of startup and getting involved, right? You mentioned the SaaS model, heavy investment on the front end. kind of what recommendations or feedback do you have to some of the listeners who are, getting involved in that space or started in that space and obviously need a big lump sum and heavy, reinvestment from a capital perspective to stay up to speed? How have you been successful and what tips would you provide?
I would say, obviously, try to keep this is advice that you'll find in our place as well, but keep that initial investment limited. Try to work out an MVP as quick as possible. Don't build a huge thing and then go to the market and say, what do you guys think? You always start with the easiest way to validate. So you start with customer interviews to really understand what people want. Then you make something simple. Then you increase, and that's the way to go. I must say, despite this advice that most people, I think, get, I still see companies doing the opposite, building a ton of product and hiring a big team, also a dumb idea, very early on. I think in my mind, the amount of companies that were with us in the startup incubator and accelerator that actually did that and raised a lot of money to do that, and then eventually failed, and then we're stuck with all the sort of the things that were attached to the fact that they raised that money, is pretty high. So definitely don't do that. Make sure that you raise money in an intelligent way, and also don't raise from VC funds right away. Also, now I think people are getting smarter at it, but still, it often seems when you're in the startup sphere that raising from VCs is a measure of success. It is not. It is a way of having resources to be successful, but it's not a measure of success. It's not because that always comes in the press that this is the way to make it. It's actually a dangerous track for many companies, because when you do that, you basically are telling people that you can become a huge company, and the moment you raise that first round, it puts you on that track to raise more rounds. Not raising the next round is a failure. It's a failure for the first VC that stepped in. It's a failure for you because they're going to be gone with most of your company, because there's all kinds of, in these contracts, lots of things attached. There's other and better ways of raising money. If you want, we have a whole masterclass on our blog on startup funding. It's a lot of content which I won't be able to cover now. If you just type in Google startup funding sales flare, you'll get to the summary post, and you can go through all of them. Don't hire too fast. It's very important. Most companies do that. Also, partly because you think you hire more people, you get more done. It's not necessarily the case, first of all. Secondly, because then they can tell, well, we already employ that many people, and it sort of feels like a measure of success. So I always think you need to hire, but hiring comes with a lot of issues. It makes that you're actually slower at iterating on things. It makes that you are spending a lot of time on the hiring and on onboarding people, and it's really a very work-intensive process. And often it's just better talking about processes, to improve your processes, to get more done with less people, and to prioritize a little better instead of adding an extra person. And then generally for SaaS, I think the most important advice is stay very close to your customers. The most common mistake is just making a website with sign up here and then let people do whatever they want from there without ever being close to it from the start. I mean, at some point you can do that when you have figured out who your customers are, what the context is, what they're thinking when they sign up, what kind of problems they go through when they try to sign up, what the first thing is they're trying to do, what the first thing is they're looking for. When you understand everything, that's something you can go towards to make that one sort of seamless experience, frictionless, no need for you or so. But it's hardly ever a great idea to do that from the start, because if you are there with the customer and going through all these things throughout that whole process, and you can learn all these things, and you can see what's going wrong, and you can adapt, and you can make it really great, that improves your chance of being successful a lot.
So a couple things I want to dive into. You mentioned MVP. I assume that means minimum viable product. And
yeah,
so,
sorry.
Just to get essentially something that works, get it out, test, learn, iterate, continue to move from that regard, I imagine, where you were headed.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned startups and incubators and also VC, right? So it sounds like you went through a startup incubator. In my experience, most of those tend to be backed by VCs or angel guys who are looking to put funds in, right? So kind of a reverse incentive based on what you're communicating. But
depends. Yeah, many of them are propelled, not necessarily funded, but they have all kinds of stuff going on, either with VCs or with partners that want to sell you stuff, or with politicians. So they're always going to gravitate towards one of these directions, or all of them at the same time. Even though they try to help you, you always need to keep that in mind. That it's not you that they're trying to help, because from that, you're not going to make enough money. Keeping a startup accelerator or incubator alive is a challenge by itself. But if you understand that as a startup, and you know this is not for us, this is for this other stakeholder they have, that is going to make you less distracted by the wrong things.
What, if you were to give one piece of advice, right? We've obviously talked about fundraising and what that looks like for entrepreneurs, particularly in the tech world.
Mm-hmm.
And gone through your entrepreneurial journey, what's been the most important thing for your success?
I'll summarize some of the things I said. Hire slow, prioritize well, validate quickly, and keep a good eye on your available amount of cash, because those are all the common places where it can go most wrong. If you keep all of these things in mind religiously, which is hard, your chance probably increases tenfold or so.
That's awesome, Jeroen. As we're wrapping up here, what's the best way for our listeners to get back in touch with you?
If you want to get in touch, or if you want to learn more about Salesflare, salesflare.com. It's Flare. If you're looking for a better way to follow up your customers, try our software. You just go to the site, sign up, and you can try everything out free for a while. And if you want to get in touch with me, LinkedIn is the best place. There's only one person with my exact name, so it won't be too hard. You will find my name somewhere, because it's difficult to, I'm not going to spell it right now, but it's complicated. But then send me a connection request with a personal message. And if you do that, I will be able to distinguish that personal request from spam, and I will get in touch with you and we can chat.
Awesome. Appreciate your time on the show, Jeroen, and appreciate the insights you shared.
You're welcome. This was fun for me as well.